Hi, my name is Judi Friedman, and I'm chairperson of PACE, People's Action for Clean Energy. And we've been having a series of wonderful shows with Nutmeg Television, a great station. We're so lucky to have it, on energy, squeaky clean energy. And we've been emphasizing money, because using clean energy is a way of making money, saving money, and if you look at it that way, it can be very interesting. We've also talked about health, because energy is a health issue, whether asthma and cancer rates skyrocketing. Health is a big, and we've talked about democracy, because clean energy is part of the democratic ideal. Unfortunately, I'm going to beg you to please listen to this program tonight, because actually, as I speak to you, I feel like crying, and I mean that, and you could probably hear it in my voice, because this is also talking about money and health and democracy. But the title of this show is called Dangerous Neighbors. I love Connecticut, and I love so many people in it, and I love my children, and I love my friends, and I love my dogs and horse and everything else. But frankly, I feel that we are in danger, and please stay with me on this subject. We have some very dangerous neighbors. One of them was and is to some extent Vermont Yankee, the nuclear plant in Vernon, Vermont. It has been happily shut down as going to be decommissioned, and that's very good news, because they have been polluting the Connecticut River. They've been polluting underneath the ground. They have a school across the street. The nurse used to keep a radiation monitor on her desk. That's one dangerous neighbor. Another one is Indian Point, New York City. And these plants are dangerous because the wind and rain blow, and they carry dangerous radiation. And Indian Point is 35 miles from New York City, and absolutely unable to evacuate the area there. And of course, then Connecticut has its very own nuclear plant, Millstone in Waterford, Connecticut. Millstone, I consider very, very dangerous. I consider it perhaps a terrorist target. It is not only the plant, but on top of the plant are stored fuel rods, 5 stories of fuel rods above. Should a plane crash into that edifice, it would release. And we all know about Fukushima. And again, I'm sorry to bring up a very difficult subject, but this is real. This is ongoing. Fukushima in Japan, they have not solved it. It's leaking radiation. It's frightening. And today, I'm pleased to tell you, we have one of the great experts in our country on this show with me today. His name is Paul Gunter, and he has been part of the Reactor Oversight Project for a long time, and he knows more about these plants and what they involve than anyone I can think of. So, Paul, thank you so much for joining me on this show about energy.
Thank you, Judy. We're very happy to be on the show with you.
Paul, tell me, why was Vermont Yankee closed?
Well, there was a driving financial factor in that the nuclear power plant could not sell its electricity to the state of Vermont anymore, because the Public Utility Commission and the government and the people no longer trusted the operators, Entergy.
Why? Why?
Which is basically because the company had not disclosed that they were leaking radioactive water into the Connecticut River.
Okay, so this is beautiful Vermont, squeaky clean green Vermont, and that plant in Vernon, which is not too far from our area of our viewing area now, were leaking water, radioactive water. Were there other toxics? What kind of radioactivity into the Connecticut River?
Well, there was tritium, which is an isotopic form of hydrogen, and also strontium 90, which seeks bone marrow. But they had found strontium 90 in some of the fish in the Connecticut River. But it was the pollution of groundwater that and then the fact that Entergy told the state of Vermont that there wasn't any concern because they didn't have any buried pipes under the Vermont Yankee Nuclear Power Plant, and it turned out to be not true. They did have buried pipe, and these buried pipe had never been maintained by the corporation, and as a result, they ruptured. But it was this accident was only one of several accidents where it was disclosed that the operators were not doing maintenance on the facility, and things were just falling apart. There was a very significant fire at one of the transformers there at Vermont Yankee, and but I think one of the main drivers is that Vermont Yankee was producing very expensive energy.
Okay,
and,
here we are, Paul. Here we are again.
They were no longer able to compete on the electricity market, and as a result of the loss of public trust, the fact that they could no longer economically compete, they decided that they would pull the operating license.
Okay, so here we
shut down in December of 2014.
So here we are again talking about money and health. So, Paul, besides the leaking water into the ground and into the Connecticut River, because they do situate these plants right on rivers. That's true of Millstone is on Long Island Sound. Indian Point is on the Hudson River. Is that right?
Correct.
And so that this is often the case. The water being discharged into the river has toxics in it. But also, there's also an air issue, is there not, from these nuclear plants?
These nuclear power plants are routinely emitting both radioactivity, and also I think it's important to note that they also have to discharge tremendous amounts of thermal heat. A typical nuclear power plant only uses 33% of the heat that's generated by that atomic reaction. The other 67% of that heat that's generated by that atomic reaction has to be treated as waste heat. And so it's, in the case of Millstone, it's dumped into the Long Island Sound, which has decimated the lobster population.
Right, okay.
They're drawing in about 2 billion gallons of water a day at the Millstone units. And similarly on the Hudson River, the Indian Point nuclear power plant is taking in about the same 2.5 billion gallons of water and then discharging it much hotter. And so you have this issue of radioactive emissions both going into the water and being released into the air, as well as tremendous amounts of marine life being drawn into the reactors like at Millstone, and then also impacted by the tremendous thermal pollution that's then discharged.
Paul, I think that there's been a lot of talk. People in Connecticut love Long Island Sound. It's just a precious, precious resource. But they're finding that there's lots of, we have sewerage runoff in and that kind of thing. But there's not much talk about what's coming from Millstone. But it's the temperature of Long Island Sound is rising, and the heated water from Millstone is helping that happen. And as you say, we're losing many fish species, for instance, lobsters, and changing the whole environment of Long Island Sound. This is pretty frightening.
Well, it's also an issue that in order for the Millstone units to operate efficiently and safely, they have to maintain technical specifications about the temperature of the water that goes into the reactors. I mean, it has to be cool enough to actually cool the reactors. What's happening is Long Island Sound, as a result of climate change, is getting warmer. And so that makes the discharges coming from the Millstone units all the more hotter. And in fact, it got so hot that the operators were violating the regulations for the Clean Water Act in terms of just how hot they could discharge. So they went back to the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and they got essentially exempted from their own regulations and specifications, so they could discharge this hotter water back into the Long Island Sound. Now, what that sets up is a vicious circle, where as climate change begins to impact water temperatures, they will be faced with the rising temperatures coming out of these nuclear power plants. So it's a vicious circle that really impacts the marine life adversely.
Another problem that concerns me very much is the contamination of food sources. The Fukushima nuclear plant they're very worried about some of the contaminated fish that is in the waters around Fukushima, and Japan's limit is 12 times stricter, I think, than ours. So Japan may not be able to eat its contaminated food, but it's okay to send it to us. Is that true? And is the contamination by the nuclear plants of food species true regarding Japan? And then, is it possible, even in Long Island Sound, that we may have some contamination from this nuclear plant?
I think that there is very real concern that the Food and Drug Administration and the USDA are not doing everything that they could do to monitor our food supply for contamination, both coming from the atmosphere and also coming from the imported foods like fish, mushrooms, other products. So the concern is that the radiation standards, first of all, are not uniform, as you point out, from country to country. The other thing is that even the strictest radiation standards right now do not effectively protect the most vulnerable of our population. The standard is based on a 25-year-old man and what they can tolerate at some acceptable level of risk. But in fact, the pregnant woman should really be the standard. That currently is not the case anywhere in the world, where the most vulnerable of our population are subjected to the same amount of radiation that the most robust. It should be pointed out, for example, that before the Fukushima accident, the standards were based at a certain level, and when the Fukushima accident occurred, the Japanese government raised that standard 20 times in order to address just the incredible large populations that would have had to been evacuated. I mean, there were 160,000 people evacuated and permanently dislocated as a population from around the nuclear accident. But if Japan had followed the international standard for evacuating populations, it would have been a much bigger population. And so we have now in Japan, we have populations living on radioactive land. They're having to pay mortgages on homes that are contaminated by radioactivity, and it's because they made a political decision to raise the national standard 20 times higher than the internationally recommended standard.
In my opinion, awful as it may sound, there always is a chance that we could have a nuclear accident in this country. So forewarned is forearmed. I'm wondering what the average citizen can do about this. I imagine one thing is to embrace clean energy, solar energy efficiency. That certainly would be a solution to try to pursue as much as possible. But to protect oneself, I do have in my hand a rad alert. It's a radiation monitor. It's something you can buy. It's handheld, and it does tell you something that your senses will not tell you. It will tell you if there's radiation and what the levels of them are. I do keep this with me when I travel, or if I think there's a problem of some sort. I have used it in the Chernobyl area. I've used it at the Nevada test site. It's very, very accurate. Also, potassium iodide, is that something else that people might want to have in their medicine cabinet? I mean, horror of horrors, probably this won't happen, but are we warned is forearmed. So what about potassium iodide, Paul? What other things would you suggest that people might want to think about in relation to these dangerous neighbors?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, the most relevant protection is prevention. And so I think that our goal is to end the nuclear age. Not only the operation of nuclear power plants, but the possession of nuclear weapons.
But how, Paul? Do it by doing what? How to end?
To replace the both fossil and fissile energy, nuclear energy, with renewable energy like solar and wind, geothermal, and coupled with energy efficiency and conservation. I mean, we need a major shift in our energy paradigm, and that I think is the priority to change energy policy so that we are not generating with a power source that requires emergency planning zones, or that requires national sacrifice areas for nuclear waste that we don't know how to manage now or into the future, but future generations will get no benefit, not a single watt, but all of the liability from nuclear waste. So that, prevention by a paradigm shift in our energy policy, and that is happening by market forces right now. The fastest growing source of new generating capacity in the United States is from the wind. And with revolutions in battery storage, which are coming in the next few years, actually, we're going to see great gains in the availability and affordability of solar power. Given, though, that that's not happening today, it is recommended, particularly to take actions that could protect, particularly the children, from a very narrow range of radioactive isotopes. that would be generated in a nuclear accident, like iodine-131, which, being iodine, it will go to the thyroid. And the idea of potassium iodide is that given adequate warning, you can take potassium iodide as recommended by the American Thyroid Association to saturate the thyroid gland with potassium iodide so that the radioactive iodine does not get absorbed by the thyroid. And this is particularly important for children, which we saw following the Chernobyl accident. You know, the Polish government in Poland took remarkable action in advance of the arrival of the radioactive cloud from Chernobyl in the Ukraine, and they administered it very effectively to children. That didn't happen in Belarus or in Ukraine or in southern Russia, and so we do see a rapid rise in thyroid cancer in these populations.
Okay, Paul, I want to thank you. We're going to be closing down this program, and I think what you're doing with your organization Beyond Nuclear is incredible, and I would urge people to join and support Beyond Nuclear if you are interested in this issue, because they're doing fine work all over the country and are very, very good people doing very difficult, challenging work. I also want to thank the viewers who are watching, who stayed tuned to this program. It's not easy to hear these things, but these are our dangerous neighbors, and we need to keep our eyes open, and we need to try to convert, as Paul Gunter so wisely says, we need to do a paradigm shift in our thinking about energy and nuclear energy not being a wise choice at all in this century. It's a last century technology that makes no sense whatsoever and is probably, in my opinion, frankly, Paul, it's immoral. So
we would agree. I think that our concern is that our energy policies should be considering not only today's environment, but the environment for the next 7 generations.
Thank you so much, Paul. Really appreciate it. You've been great, and good luck to you and your wonderful work. We appreciate all you're doing so much. It's not easy, and you're just doing a great job, and your whole staff is terrific. Terrific people. I know them personally. So thank you for being on the program. It means a lot.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I have want to just thank everybody for watching this program. As I said, it's not an easy one to watch. It's not fun to think about, but it's very, very, very important. Thank you.